Let me get into the investing thing real quick and talk about a few things there. I learned from the great investors. And I have a number of investment heroes. Obviously, Warren Buffett is at the top of the list, followed by Peter Lynch. Peter Lynch managed the Fidelity Magellan Fund for 15 years. Great investor. He's the guy that taught me to invest in things you know and understand. John Bogle, the father of index investing. I don't know if John Bogle and and Warren Buffett have ever met each other. I would have to think that somewhere along the lines their lives, their paths crossed. They're both about the same age, in their early 80s. So I would have to assume that they did. Now, Warren Buffett has been eminently successful because he has been very good at selecting companies to invest in. He's the largest shareholder in Coca-Cola. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. Largest shareholder in Coca-Cola, largest shareholder American Express, Wells Fargo, owns a lot of companies, lock, stock, and barrel. Geico Insurance is owned by his company. The company that Buffett runs is called Berkshire Hathaway. Okay, you need to know that because you need to go to that website, Berkshire Hathaway. Okay, and through that company, he owns all of these publicly traded companies, but he also owns a lot of companies that are no longer public. The Burlington Northern Railroad, he's a big investor in railroads, a big investor in insurance. As I mentioned, he owns Geico, completely owns Geico through his company, Berkshire Hathaway, and many other companies as well. He owns See's Candy, okay, that's another company he owns. He owns Dairy Queen, okay, stuff like that. So that's the kind of guy he is. That's the way he invested. Now, the only reason I bring up Buffett and John Bogle is the father of index investing. He's the guy that said, why pay big fees for an investment portfolio that's managed by someone when 90% of the time an index fund that just simply follows the S&P 500 or something like that, up and down, will outperform these managed funds, okay? Bogle is a big champion for all of us in this room. He's the big champion of keeping fees and costs down. Bogle will tell you that there are two things that sabotage your return as an investor, and neither of them have to do anything with the volatility of the stock market. But there are two things that will sabotage your return as an investor. One is taxes, and the other is fees. And if you can control those two things, you will be eminently successful as an investor. All right, I got to close this circle here. I keep getting away from it, but let me get back to it. He writes a letter every year. Buffett writes a letter every year to his shareholders. And you can read those letters going back some odd number of years, 50 whatever years. And they all are like a letter from home from your dearly loved uncle. I mean, they are just so full of wisdom and advice, it's not even funny. Now, Buffett has told his children, who are all extremely wealthy people on their own, that when he dies, they're not getting anything. Okay? All of his assets will be distributed to charities. Primarily, the vast majority of the money he has will be given to the charity operated by Bill and Melinda Gates. He's already given billions of dollars to that charity. That's pretty much where it's going to go. But in his most recent letter that came out in May of this year, he talked about the monies that he does have that will be distributed to family, friends, and stuff. And these are relatively small amounts. So I'm going to read you just a little bit here. He says, "My money, I should add, is where my mouth is. What I advise here is essentially identical to certain instructions I've laid out in my will. One bequest provides the cash will be delivered to a trustee for my wife's benefit. My advice to the trustee could not be more simple. Put 10% of the cash in short-term government bonds, 10% of the cash in short-term government bonds, and 90% in a very low-cost S&P 500 index fund." Then he puts in parentheses, "I suggest Vanguard's." He says, "I believe the trust's long-term results from this policy will be superior to those attained by most investors, whether pension funds, institutions, or individuals who employ high-fee managers." 10% in a short-term, this is very important, short-term bond fund, 90% in an S&P 500 index fund. Now, if the greatest investor of all time is going to tell the people that he's bequesting money to put it into an index fund, You don't have to be you don't have to be, you kind of would be foolish to kind of not follow most of that advice, especially if you're new to the game of investing. By the way, this Monday, I think it was this Monday, yeah, Buffett's stock, Berkshire Hathaway, hit an all-time high. It traded at $202,000 a share. It closed at today it closed at $202,388. It was actually down a bit today. Now, if you want to buy into Buffett's company, you can do it. What I just told you, that price, $202,000, that's for what are called the A shares of Berkshire Hathaway. There's another class of stock, the B shares, that closed today at $135 a share. And there's no more zeros. That's it, $135 a share, okay? It's exactly the same stock. It's exactly the same company, but it represents a fraction of, obviously, one share of the A shares. So you can do that. You can buy into Buffett now and not have to spend a fortune. You can get in there for $135. So that's a pretty good deal. I don't own any of Buffett stock, although I've been talking about it. I've been thinking I might. It's at an all-time high, so I'm going to buy it at an all-time high, right? But there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with buying stocks at all-time highs, because there's a reason that they're very high, because they're worth it. Okay, stocks that are trading for $1 are trading for $1 because that's all they're worth. Okay, people go shopping for stocks. They'll open up the Wall Street Journal and look at stocks hitting new all-time lows. When I go looking for stocks, which I don't do very often, I always look at the list of stocks that are hitting new all-time highs, okay, because those are stocks that obviously are doing something right, companies that are doing something right.